I'm Margaret Whitmore, and I thought I was hosting a family Christmas dinner. Instead, I was about to witness the moment my daughter-in-law finally revealed what she really thought of me. What she didn't know was that her words would cost her everything. Before we begin, please subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Stories like these need to be heard. The evening started like every Christmas for the past 8 years, since my husband Robert passed away. I'd spent days preparing, cooking Robert's favorite recipes, setting the table with our wedding china, and arranging the house so everything would be perfect for David, Jessica, and little Emma. David is my only child, and after losing Robert, he became the center of my world. Maybe that was my first mistake. When he married Jessica 5 years ago, I welcomed her with open arms, hoping to gain not just a daughter-in-law, but a daughter. I was lonely in this big house, and I thought Jessica might fill some of that emptiness. I was wrong. Jessica was beautiful, polished, and knew exactly what to say in front of David. But when he wasn't looking, her mask would slip. The sideways glances, the subtle corrections, the way she'd rearrange things I'd set up to make them better. I told myself I was being oversensitive. That every mother-in-law goes through an adjustment period. Tonight felt different from the moment they walked through the door. David seemed tense, barely making eye contact. Jessica was overly bright, her smile too wide, her compliments too frequent. And Emma, my sweet granddaughter, kept looking between her parents like she was waiting for something to happen. Margaret, the table looks absolutely stunning, Jessica gushed, but her eyes were scanning the room like a real estate appraiser. You've really outdone yourself this year. Thank you, dear, I replied, helping Emma into her chair. I wanted everything to be special. Oh, it is, Jessica said, her voice carrying that particular tone I'd learned to recognize. The one that sounded like a compliment but felt like a criticism. Very traditional. David barely acknowledged the effort I'd put in. He sat down heavily, checking his phone while Jessica continued her performance of the perfect daughter-in-law. But I caught her whispering something to David, and whatever she said made him glance at me with an expression I couldn't read. The first course went smoothly enough. Emma chattered about school, her Christmas pageant, and the cookies she wanted to bake tomorrow. I drank in every word, treasuring these moments with my granddaughter. In recent months, I'd noticed David and Jessica scheduling fewer visits, always with excuses about busy schedules or other commitments. It was during the main course that things began to unravel. Margaret, Jessica said, setting down her fork with deliberate precision. David and I have been talking, and we're concerned about you living alone in this big house. I looked up, surprised, concerned. Why? David shifted uncomfortably, but didn't meet my eyes. Jessica continued smoothly. Well, you're not getting any younger, and this house is so much work. We've been researching some lovely senior communities. I'm perfectly capable of managing my own home. I interrupted gently. I have Mrs. Patterson who helps with cleaning, and the gardener comes weekly. I'm quite content here. But are you really? Jessica's voice took on that concerned, patronizing tone I'd grown to hate. David's told me how lonely you get, how you call him almost every day because you have no one else to talk to. The words hit like a slap. I did call David regularly, but not because I was lonely and desperate. I called because I loved my son and wanted to maintain our relationship. I looked at David, waiting for him to correct her, but he was studying his plate like it held the secrets of the universe. I don't call because I'm lonely, I said carefully. I call because David is my son, and I love him. Jessica laughed, a tinkling sound that made my skin crawl. Oh, Margaret, that's exactly what I mean. You're so dependent on David for emotional support. It's not healthy for either of you. Emma looked confused, glancing between us. I forced a smile for her benefit, but inside something was breaking. What exactly are you suggesting, Jessica? We found this wonderful place called Sunset Manor. It's specifically designed for people in your situation. You'd have structured activities, medical care on site, and you wouldn't have to worry about maintaining this enormous house anymore. I set down my silverware slowly. My situation. Independent seniors who need a little extra support. David finally spoke up, though he still wouldn't look at me. Mom, the house is getting too big for you. You said yourself last month that climbing the stairs was getting harder. I had mentioned that my knee was bothering me after a particularly long gardening session, but I never said I couldn't manage the stairs. The fact that David had twisted my casual comment into evidence of my decline felt like a betrayal. I see, I said quietly. And have you already visited this place? Jessica and David exchanged a look. We drove by last week, Jessica admitted, just to get an idea of what's available. The apartments are actually quite nice, and the community is very active. How thoughtful of you to plan my future without consulting me. We're consulting you now, Jessica said, her patience clearly wearing thin. We're trying to help you see that this is the best option for everyone. Everyone. Well, Yes, be happier and safer, and David and I could stop worrying about you being alone in this house. Plus, if you sold the house, you'd have plenty of money for the senior community. And she trailed off, but I heard what she didn't say and I prompted. David cleared his throat. Emma's getting older and the school district here is really excellent. Something happened to you and the house had to be sold quickly. It might not get the best price, but if you sold now while the market is good, you could secure your future and maybe help us secure Emma's. There it was. They wanted me out of my house so they could move in. The house where I'd lived for 35 years, where I'd raised David, where Robert and I had planned to grow old together. I see. I looked at Emma, who was pushing her mashed potatoes around her plate, clearly sensing the tension but not understanding it. And what does Emma think about Grandma moving away? Emma will visit you all the time, Jessica said quickly. Won't you, sweetheart? Emma nodded, but her eyes were sad. Will you still make me cookies if you live in the apartment? Of course. I will, I assured her, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. Actually, Jessica interjected, the senior community has restrictions on cooking in the individual units, something about safety, but they have a lovely communal kitchen for special occasions. So I wouldn't even be able to bake cookies for my granddaughter in my own kitchen. Every tradition, every simple pleasure would be subject to institutional rules and schedules. I think I need some time to consider this, I said. Of course, David said, relief evident in his voice. We don't want to pressure you. It's just that the apartment we looked at won't be available forever. And you looked at a specific apartment? Jessica had the grace to look embarrassed. We just wanted to be prepared with all the information when we talked to you. The conversation moved onto other topics, but the damage was done. I mechanically served desserts, smiled at Emma's stories, and played the role of the agreeable mother and grandmother. But inside, I was processing what had really just happened. They weren't suggesting this move out of concern for my well-being. They wanted my house. They wanted me out of the way, tucked into a managed facility where I'd be someone else's responsibility. And they'd presented it as though they were doing me a favor. After dinner, while David and Emma played in the living room, Jessica cornered me in the kitchen. I know this is a big adjustment, she said, her voice honey-sweet. But Margaret, you have to understand. David has been carrying the emotional burden of worrying about you for years. It's affecting our marriage. Continue drying dishes. Not trusting myself to speak. He feels guilty every time we go out of town, wondering if you're okay. He worries about you falling or having a medical emergency or just being lonely. It's not fair to him. I never asked David to worry about me. You don't have to ask. You're his mother. But the constant need for reassurance, the way you depend on him for social interaction, it's exhausting him. I turned to face her. Jessica, what exactly are you saying? Her mask slipped just a little. I'm saying that David deserves better than having to manage his mother's emotional need. He deserves a wife who has his full attention, not someone who's constantly competing with his mother for priority. I'm not competing with you. Aren't you? Her voice was sharper now. Every time we plan a vacation, you suddenly need something. Every time we have a romantic evening planned, you call with some crisis. David's 45 years old. Margaret, think it's time you let him live his own life? I stared at this woman who had just accused me of sabotaging my son's marriage through the simple act of existing in his life. What would make you happy, Jessica? What would be enough? She smiled then, thinking she'd won. David needs to be able to focus on his own family now, his wife and daughter. Not constantly worry about his aging mother who refuses to accept that. She needs more care than she's getting. More care than I'm getting from whom? From anyone. That's the point. You're alone, Margaret. You have no friends, no social life, no purpose except to lean on David. That's not healthy for any of you. It was then that I realized Jessica wasn't just suggesting I move to a senior community. She was systematically trying to cut me out of David's life entirely. The senior community was just step one. Once I was there, the visits would become less frequent. The calls would be discouraged. And eventually, I'd become a quarterly obligation instead of a weekly presence. I see, I said quietly. I knew you'd understand once we talked it through, Jessica said, her smile returning. You're such a reasonable woman. David was worried you'd be emotional about this, but I told him you'd see that we're all just trying to do what's best for the family. Yes, I agree. What's best for the family? That night, after they left, I sat alone in my living room, looking at the Christmas tree Robert and I had bought 30 years ago. The ornaments told the story of our life together, our first Christmas. As newlyweds, David's baby booties from his first Christmas, the handmade decorations he'd created in elementary school, and newer additions from Emma's early years. This house wasn't just where I lived. It was the repository of my entire adult life. Every room held memories. Every corner had witnessed moments of joy and sorrow that had shaped me into who I was. And Jessica wanted me to abandon it all so she could have easier access to what she saw as David's inheritance. But I wasn't ready to be discarded yet. The next morning, I called my attorney, William Morrison. I'd known Bill since he was a young associate at Robert's firm, and now he managed my affairs with the discretion and competence I'd come to rely on. "Margaret," he said warmly when I arrived at his office, "I wasn't expecting to see you until after the new year. How was Christmas?" "Enlightening," I replied. "Bill, I need to make some changes to my will." His expression grew serious. "What kind of changes?" I told him about the dinner conversation, about Jessica's barely concealed demands, about David's passive compliance with his wife's plans for my future. "They want you out of your house," Bill said bluntly. "Yes, and into a managed care facility, where I'll be safely out of the way. What would you like to do about it?" "I've been thinking about this all night. I want to ensure that if something happens to me, my house doesn't automatically become their prize for putting up with the inconvenience of having a mother-in-law." Bill leaned back in his chair. "Tell me what you're thinking." "I want to create a trust. If David truly believes I need managed care, then I'll provide for that possibility. But I want to ensure the house is protected and that Emma's future is secured independently of whatever David and Jessica might decide is best for themselves." "That's very wise. What about David's inheritance?" "I considered this. I don't want to punish David for having a manipulative wife, but I also don't want to reward Jessica's behavior. Is there a way to structure things so that David benefits if he shows genuine concern for my well-being, but Jessica can't use my assets to fund her lifestyle?" Bill smiled. "There are several ways to accomplish that. We could establish a care trust that provides for your needs if you do require assisted living, with any remainder going to Emma when she reaches adulthood. We could also set up conditions for David's inheritance that ensure he maintains a genuine relationship with you, not just the appearance of one." "What kind of conditions?" "Regular visits, involvement in your care decisions if they become necessary, and proof that any decisions about your living situation are made in genuine consultation with you, not imposed upon you." We spent the next 3 hours restructuring my estate. When we finished, I had created a comprehensive plan that would provide for my care if needed, protect my assets from manipulation, and ensure Emma's future education was funded regardless of her parents' financial decisions. But most importantly, I had sent a clear message. I wasn't going to be shuffled off to make room for someone else's convenience. The real test came 2 weeks later. David called on a Tuesday evening, voice tense. "Mom, we need to talk. Can Jessica and I come over?" "This weekend, of course," I said. "Is everything all right?" "We'll discuss it when we see you." They arrived Saturday afternoon without Emma, which immediately told me this wasn't a social visit. Jessica was carrying a folder and wearing her most serious expression. "Margaret," David began, "as soon as we sat down, we've been doing more research about senior communities, and we found something perfect, but we need to move quickly." "Oh," Jessica opened her folder. "Sunset Manor has had a cancellation. The apartment we looked at is available again, but only until the end of the month. If you want it, we need to put down a deposit this week." Looked at the brochures and application forms she'd spread across my coffee table. They'd been busy. "This seems very sudden," I said. "We know," David said, "but opportunities like this don't come along often. The waiting list for this place is usually 2 years. You think I should move there?" "Mom, we've talked about this. You said you'd consider it." "I said I'd think about it. I didn't say I'd decided." Jessica's patience was clearly wearing. "Then, Margaret, what exactly are you waiting for? You're going to have to make this transition eventually. Wouldn't you rather do it while you're still healthy enough to adjust?" "What if I'm not ready to make this transition?" "Then when will you be?" Jessica's voice was sharper now. "When you fall down the stairs, when you have a medical emergency and no one finds you for days, when you can't manage the house anymore and it falls into disrepair." David squirmed uncomfortably, but didn't contradict his wife. "Jessica," I said calmly, "you seem to have very specific ideas about what my future should look like. But this is my life we're discussing. It's David's life too," she snapped. "Do you have any idea how much stress you're putting on him? Lies awake at night worrying about you. He can't enjoy a vacation because he's constantly wondering if you're okay. He feels guilty every time we make plans that don't include you because he knows you're sitting in this house alone. Has David told you he feels this way? He doesn't have to tell me. I can see it. I live with him. I watch him carry the burden of your dependency every single day." I looked at David. "Is that how you feel?" Burdened by me? David looked miserable. Mom, it's not that you're a burden. It's just ... I worry. And Jessica's right that it affects our relationship sometimes. How? Well, like when we wanted to go to Europe last summer, but we were worried about leaving you alone for 2 weeks. I never asked you not to go to Europe. You didn't have to ask. But you mentioned how quiet the neighborhood gets in the summer, and how Mrs. Peterson was going to visit her daughter. And we felt bad leaving you. I stared at my son. So because I mentioned that the neighborhood was quiet, you felt manipulated into canceling your vacation. We didn't cancel it, Jessica interjected. Kay, we just shortened it to 5 days instead of 2 weeks. Kay, and you resent me for that? We don't resent you, David said quickly. Kay, we just think if you were in a community with other people with activity and support, we wouldn't have to worry so much. You wouldn't have to think about me so much. You mean? Not what I said, but it's what you meant. Jessica leaned forward. Margaret, you have to see that this arrangement isn't working for anyone. You're lonely. David's stressed, and I'm watching my husband sacrifice his peace of mind for someone who refuses to accept help. What help am I refusing? The help of professional, the support of a community, the security of knowing that if something happens, there are people trained to deal with it. I nodded slowly. I see. And what about Emma? What about her? How does she fit into this plan? Will she visit me in this community? Of course she will, David said. How often? They exchanged a glance. Well, probably not as often as she does now, Jessica admitted. The community is about 40 minutes away, and with Emma's school schedule and activities, so I'd see my granddaughter less frequently. You'd see her when it was convenient for everyone, Jessica said. Instead of expecting us to structure our lives around your social needs. There it was, the truth, finally spoken aloud. I expect you to structure your lives around my social needs, don't you? Jessica's mask was completely off now. Every holiday has to be at your house. Every family celebration revolves around what you want, when you want it. Emma can't have a sleepover at our house without you calling to check on her. David can't make a decision about his own life without worrying about how it will affect you. I looked at this woman who had just described basic family relationships as unreasonable demands. What would make you happy, Jessica? I want my husband to be able to live his own life without constantly managing his mother's emotional needs. I want to plan a vacation without worrying about whether you'll have a crisis while we're gone. I want to raise my daughter without having to schedule our lives around your expectations. What expectation? That will always be available for you. That David will always put your needs ahead of his family's needs. That Emma will grow up thinking it's normal to sacrifice her own opportunities to take care of elderly relatives. Felt something cold settle in my chest. You don't want Emma to learn to care for family members? I want Emma to learn that she has choices, that she's not obligated to sacrifice her life for people who refuse to take responsibility for their own circumstances. I see. Do you? Because David's too kind to say this, but I'm not. Your son deserves better than you. The words hung in the air like a bomb that had just exploded. David's face went white. Jessica, he started, but she continued. He deserves a mother who wants what's best for him, not what's most convenient for her. He deserves to be free of the guilt and obligation that you've wrapped around him like chains. He deserves better than you. I smiled, actually smiled. Excuse me for a moment, I said, standing up. I need to make a quick phone call. I walked to my study, closed the door, and called Bill Morrison. Bill, it's Margaret. I need you to execute the changes we discussed immediately. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I'll have the documents ready by Monday. Thank you. I returned to the living room where David was speaking to Jessica in hushed, urgent tones. They stopped when they saw me. I've made my decision, I announced. Relief flooded David's face. Really? You'll consider the community? Oh, I've already considered it, and I've decided that you're absolutely right. This arrangement isn't working for anyone. Jessica smiled triumphantly. I knew you'd see reason once you really thought about it. Yes, I'm seeing a lot of things very clearly now. Fact, I'm seeing my entire future differently. So you'll move to Sunset Manor? David asked. No, I said pleasantly. I've decided to make some other changes instead. Asterisk. Jessica's smile faltered. What kind of changes? I'm restructuring my estate. I realize that if you're right about David deserving better than me, then I should make sure he gets exactly what he deserves. What does that mean? David asked nervously. Okay. It means that I've set up a trust that will provide for my care if I ever need it, fund Emma's education completely, and ensure that my house is protected from anyone who might see it as an opportunity rather than a home. Mom, what are you saying? I'm saying that Jessica is right. You do deserve better. You deserve the freedom to live your life without any obligations to me whatsoever. So I'm releasing you from those obligations permanently. Jessica's face had gone pale. You can't just cut David out of your will because we suggested you might be happier in a community setting. I'm not cutting David out of anything, merely ensuring that my assets go to people who see them as a responsibility rather than an opportunity. But the house Jessica started will be held in trust for Emma until she's 30. If I ever need care, the trust will provide for it. If I don't, Emma will inherit everything when she's old enough to make wise decisions about it. You can't do this, Jessica said, standing up. That house is David's inheritance. You can't just give it to a child. I can do whatever I want with my property, Jessica. And I've decided that Emma is the only member of this family who loves me without calculating what she might gain from that love. David looked stricken. Mom, please, let's talk about this. Rationally, I am being rational. Jessica told me that you deserve better than me. I agree. You deserve the freedom to live your life without any connection to someone who's such a burden to you. I never said you were a burden. You said worrying about me was affecting your marriage. You said my presence in your life prevented you from enjoying your vacations and your peace of mind. Jessica said you deserved better than me. So I'm giving you what you apparently want, complete freedom from any obligation to maintain a relationship with me. But what about Emma? David asked desperately. Emma can visit me whenever she wants for as long as she wants. The trust will provide for any expenses related to her care when she's with me. But Jessica made it very clear that she doesn't want Emma to grow up thinking she's obligated to care for elderly relatives, so I won't impose that burden on her. You're being ridiculous, Jessica snapped. You can't just cut us off because we tried to help you plan for your future. I'm not cutting you off, I'm simply accepting your assessment of our relationship. You've told me that I'm a burden, that I'm emotionally manipulative, that I prevent David from living his own life, and that he deserves better than me. I agree with you, but you're punishing us for being honest. I'm protecting myself from people who see me as an obligation rather than a family member. David was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. We can work this out. We don't have to make any dramatic changes right now. Yes, we do. Because Jessica was right about one thing. This arrangement isn't working for anyone. I've been trying to maintain relationships with people who fundamentally don't want me in their lives. That's not fair to any of us. We want you in our lives, David protested, on your terms, when it's convenient, as long as I don't need anything, want anything, or expect anything. That's not a relationship, David. That's an arrangement. Jessica tried a different approach. Margaret, you're being emotional. Let's table this discussion and revisit it when everyone's had time to calm down. I'm perfectly calm, and I've made my decision. But what about David's inheritance? What about the life insurance money? You can't just give everything to Emma. I can. And I have. David will inherit a small trust fund that will mature when he's 65, assuming he maintains regular contact with me until then. But the house, the bulk of my assets, and Robert's life insurance will all go to Emma. This is insane, Jessica said. You're an old woman living alone in a house that's too big for you. And instead of accepting help, you're destroying your family. I'm not destroying anything. I'm simply acknowledging what you've already destroyed. They left shortly after that, Jessica slamming the door and David looking back at me with an expression I couldn't read. I spent that evening going through photo albums, looking at pictures of David growing up, our family vacations and holidays. In every photo, he looked happy to be with me. But people change. And apparently, my son had grown to see me as a burden rather than a blessing. The next few weeks were quiet. David called once, but the conversation was stilted and brief. He didn't apologize for Jessica's behavior, and he didn't ask me to reconsider my decision. He simply said he hoped we could work things out eventually. Emma called me 3 times, using Jessica's phone when her mother was distracted. She wanted to know why Daddy seemed sad and why they weren't going to visit Grandma anymore. Sometimes, adults have disagreements, sweetheart, I told her, but that doesn't change how much I love you. Can I still come visit you? Anytime you want. What about Christmas? Will you still make cookies? I'll make cookies whenever you want them. 3 months later, Bill called with news I'd been expecting. David and Jessica have filed a petition to have you declared incompetent, he said. They're claiming that cutting them out of your will proves you're not capable of making rational decisions. I wasn't surprised. What do we need to do? I've already scheduled you for a comprehensive competency evaluation with Dr. Sarah Henderson. She's the best geriatric psychiatrist in the state. We'll also need character witnesses who can testify to your mental acuity. How long will this take? Probably 6 months to a year. But Margaret, I have to warn you, this is going to get ugly. They're going to challenge every aspect of your life, your relationships, your decision-making ability. They'll try to paint you as an isolated, paranoid old woman who's lost touch with reality. Let them try. The competency hearing was held on a gray Tuesday in April, David and Jessica sat with their attorney, while I sat with Bill and Dr. Henderson, who had spent 6 hours evaluating me and concluded that I was not only competent, but exceptionally clear thinking for someone in any age group. Their attorney presented Jessica's version of events. I was an emotionally manipulative woman who had become increasingly demanding and irrational, culminating in a vindictive decision to disinherit my son because he suggested I might benefit from assisted living. Jessica took the stand and painted herself as a concerned daughter-in-law who had only wanted what was best for everyone. She described me as isolated, dependent, and prone to emotional outbursts when I didn't get my way. David's testimony was harder to listen to. He described feeling constantly worried about me, feeling guilty when he tried to live his own life, and being shocked by my decision to change my will. When Bill cross-examined him, the truth began to emerge. Mr. Brooke, how often did your mother call you before this incident? Maybe 3 or 4 times a week. And what did she typically want when she called? Just to talk. Usually, about her day or something she'd seen on the news, or to ask about Emma. Did she ever ask you for money? No. Did she ever ask you to cancel your plans to spend time with her? Not directly. Did she ever threaten to hurt herself if you didn't visit her? No. Did she ever say anything to suggest she was unhappy living alone? David hesitated. She sometimes mentioned that the house was quiet. Did she ask you to move in with her? No. Did she ask you to move her in with you? So when your wife suggested that your mother needed assisted living, what specific incidents of incompetence or dangerous behavior was she citing? David couldn't answer that question. When I took the stand, Bill asked me to explain my decision to restructure my estate. I realized that my son and daughter-in-law saw me as a burden rather than a family member. I said calmly, they wanted me to move to a facility so they could stop worrying about me, which I understood to mean they wanted me out of their lives unless it was convenient for them. I decided to grant them that wish. Did you make this decision in anger? No. I made it after careful consideration of what kind of relationship I wanted to have with people who saw my presence in their lives as a problem to be solved. Do you love your son very much? Which is why I've given him exactly what he said he wanted, freedom from any obligation to me. The judge ruled in my favor. He found that I was completely competent, that my decision to restructure my estate was well within the bounds of rational decision-making, and that David and Jessica's petition was without merit. But more importantly, he ordered them to pay my legal fees, which totaled nearly $30,000. After the hearing, David approached me in the hallway. Mom, I'm sorry. Never wanted it to go this far. I looked at this man I'd raised, this person I'd loved unconditionally for 45 years, and felt a sadness that went deeper than anger. I know you didn't, David, but you let it happen anyway. Can't we find a way to fix this? What would you like to fix? Our relationship, our family. What would that look like? He didn't have an answer for that, because he'd never thought beyond. Getting what he wanted, my house and my assets, without the inconvenience of maintaining a genuine relationship with me. I love you, he said finally. I love you too. But love isn't enough when it comes with conditions. 6 months later, Emma started spending weekends with me. Jessica wasn't happy about it, but the trust I'd established gave Emma the legal right to visit me, and David didn't fight it. Emma is 9 now, and every Saturday morning she helps me bake cookies in the kitchen Jessica wanted to take away from me. She tells me about school, her friends, and her dreams for the future. She doesn't know about the legal battles or the harsh words that were spoken. She only knows that Grandma's house is a place where she's loved unconditionally. David and Taze, I maintain a distant but polite relationship. He calls on my birthday and holidays, and I'm cordial. Jessica no longer comes to these brief visits, which suits both of us fine. The house that they wanted so badly remains mine. Still climb the stairs every night. I still tend my garden every morning, and I still live my life on my own terms. When the time comes that I truly can't manage alone, the trust will provide for my care. But that decision will be mine to make, not someone else's to impose. I learned something important through all of this. Sometimes the people we love most are the ones who hurt us deepest, not because they mean to, but because they stop seeing us as people and start seeing us as problems to be solved. Jessica was right about one thing. David did deserve better than me. He deserved a mother who would let herself be manipulated and controlled rather than stand up for her own dignity. He deserved someone who would accept being discarded rather than fight for her right to be respected, but I deserved better too. I deserved a son who would defend me rather than enable his wife's cruelty. I deserved a family who saw me as a blessing rather than a burden. In the end, we both got what we deserved. David got his freedom from any obligation to me, And I got my freedom from people who saw my love as a chain rather than a gift. Some days I'm sad about what we lost, but most days I'm grateful for what I found. The strength to demand the respect I deserve, and the wisdom to know the difference between being loved and being tolerated. Emma and I are making cookies this afternoon. She's learned to crack egg without getting shells in the bowl, and she can measure flour almost as well as I can. In 20 years, when she inherits this house, she'll know it as a place where she was cherished, not a prize to be won. And that, I think, is a much better legacy than teaching her that family members are burdens to be managed rather than people to be treasured. Sometimes, the greatest gift you can give someone is exactly what they say they want, even when it's not what they expected to receive. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Let me know in the comments, have you ever had to choose between your dignity and keeping peace in your family? Sometimes standing up for yourself is the most loving thing you can do. Subscribe for more stories about finding strength in difficult situations, and remember, your worth isn't determined by how convenient you are for other people. The story doesn't end there, though. Life has a way of teaching lessons to everyone involved, not just the person who stands up for themselves. 2 years after the court hearing, I received an unexpected phone call. It was David, but his voice was different, shaky, uncertain. I need to ask you something, and I understand if you say no. I waited. Jessica and I are getting divorced. I wasn't surprised. The marriage built on manipulation and entitlement rarely survives when the manipulated person finally sees clearly. I'm sorry to hear that, David. It's demanding half of everything, including Emma's college fund that we set up. She says since Emma isn't her biological daughter from her previous marriage, Mom, I don't know what to do. My lawyer says she might actually get it. The irony wasn't lost on me. Jessica, who had been so concerned about Emma learning to sacrifice for elderly relatives, was now perfectly willing to sacrifice Emma's future for her own financial gain. What are you asking me, David? I know I have no right to ask this after everything that happened, but Emma's trust fund, the one you set up, could you access it early to help with her expenses if Jessica takes the college money? I closed my eyes. Even now, he was asking me to solve his problems, but this time, it wasn't for his convenience. It was for Emma's protection. David, Emma's trust is designed to provide for exactly these kinds of situations. Jessica succeeds in taking money that was meant for Emma's education. The trust will ensure Emma doesn't suffer for her stepmother's greed. So you'll help. I'll protect Emma. That's what the trust was created for. There was a long pause. Then, quietly, I think I understand now what you were trying to tell me. About Jessica. About what she was doing to our family. What do you understand? She never loved me. She loved what I could give her. And when I couldn't give her what she wanted, when you changed your will, and she realized she wasn't going to get your house, she started looking for someone who could give her more. I didn't say I told you so. There was no satisfaction in watching my son's marriage crumble, even if I'd seen it coming from the beginning. David, what do you want from me now? I want to be a better father to Emma. And maybe learn how to be a better son. What would that look like? I don't know. I was hoping you might teach me. It wasn't a grand apology. It wasn't a dramatic reconciliation. It was just a broken man finally admitting that he'd made terrible choices and asking for a chance to do better. Emma spends every weekend with me. I said, you're welcome to join us. Even after everything I let happen, David, I never stopped loving you. I just stopped accepting being treated badly in the name of that love. The first weekend David joined us was awkward. Emma was thrilled to have both her father and grandmother together, but David seemed uncertain about how to act around me. He kept apologizing for things, for Jessica's behavior, for the court case, for not standing up for me. Finally, while Emma was in the garden picking tomatoes, I stopped him. David, I don't need constant apologies. I need to see that you've learned something from what happened. What do you mean? Mean that saying you're sorry is easy? Changing your behavior is hard. Which one are you prepared to do? He thought about that for a long moment. Both, I hope. It took months, but slowly David began to understand what I'd been trying to tell him all along. He started seeing Jessica's behavior patterns in their relationship. How she'd isolated him from friends who didn't approve of her. How she'd made him feel guilty for wanting to maintain his relationship with me. How she'd positioned herself as the victim whenever anyone questioned her demands. She used to say you were manipulative. He told me one Saturday while we watched Emma play in the yard. But she was the one manipulating. She made me feel like wanting to see my own mother was a betrayal of my marriage. Why didn't you see it at the time? I think I did see it sometime, but it was easier to go along with what she wanted than to fight about it. And she was very good at making me feel guilty when I did try to stand up to her. So you've sacrificed our relationship to keep peace in your marriage. Yes, and I lost both anyway. The divorce proceedings revealed the full extent of Jessica's character. She hired a private investigator to try to prove that David was unfit to have custody of Emma. She claimed that his relationship with me was evidence of inappropriate family dynamic. She even tried to argue that Emma spending weekends with me was psychologically damaging because I was filling the child's head with stories about family loyalty. But the judge saw through her manipulations just as clearly as I had. Emma was old enough to express her own preferences, and she made it very clear that she wanted to continue living with her father and visiting her grandmother. Jessica was granted visitation rights, but Emma rarely chose to exercise them. Why doesn't Emma want to spend time with Jessica? David asked me one day. "'Cause Jessica never learned to love Emma without conditions," I replied. "Emma knows the difference between someone who genuinely cares about her and someone who sees her as a tool to get what they want." 3 years have passed since that Christmas dinner that changed everything. Emma is 12 now, and she's growing into a thoughtful, confident young woman who understands that real love doesn't come with strings attached. David has learned to be both a better father and a better son. He doesn't just visit me out of obligation anymore. He comes because he wants to. He asks for my advice, not because he expects me to solve his problems, but because he values my opinion. Most importantly, he's learned to set boundaries with people who tried to manipulate him. "I understand now why you changed your will," he told me recently. "You weren't punishing me. You were protecting Emma from people who would have seen her inheritance as their opportunity." Yes, and I was protecting myself from people who saw my love as their right rather than my gift. Jessica remarried last year. Her new husband is wealthy, which explains her sudden disinterest in fighting for Emma's time. She sends birthday cards and Christmas gifts, but makes no effort to maintain a real relationship with her stepdaughter. Emma seems relieved rather than hurt by this distance. "Do you think Jessica ever really loved me?" David asked me once. "I think Jessica loved the idea of you," I replied. "The successful husband, the nice house, the comfortable life. But love requires seeing someone as a complete person, not just as a provider of the things you want." Last month, Emma asked me a question that made me realize how much she'd learned from watching our family's struggles. "Grandma, how do you know if someone really loves you?" "What do you think?" I asked her. "I think people who really love you want you to be happy, even if it's not convenient for them, and they don't try to change you into someone else." Very wise. "Is that why you changed your will?" "'Cause Daddy and Jessica wanted to change you into someone who would give them what they wanted." I looked at this remarkable child who had grown up watching adults behave badly, but had somehow learned the right lessons anyway. "Yes, sweetheart. Sometimes people we love make choices that show us they don't love us the same way we love them. When that happens, we have to decide whether to keep accepting less than we deserve or to stand up for ourselves, even if it makes them angry. Especially if it makes them angry. People who truly love you might be disappointed by your choices, but they won't try to destroy you for making them." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "Glad you stood up for yourself, Grandma. And I'm glad Daddy learned how to be better." "Me too, sweetheart. Christmas will be different from that terrible dinner 3 years ago. It will be smaller. Just David, Emma, and me. But it will be real. No manipulation. No hidden agendas, no demands disguised as concern. Just 3 people who have learned to love each other without condition. I still live in the house Jessica wanted so badly. I still climb the stairs every night, still tend my garden every morning. The difference is that now I'm not sharing my space with people who resent my presence in it. The trust fund remains intact, growing steadily for Emma's future. She knows about it now. I believe in being honest with children about important things. She also knows that with privilege comes responsibility, and that someday she'll need to decide what kind of person she wants to be with the advantages she's been given. "I want to be like you, Grandma," she told me last week. "Strong enough to stand up for myself, but kind enough to forgive people when they learn to do better." That's when I knew that everything I'd been through, the betrayal, the court battles, the months of estrangement from my son, had been worth it. Not because I'd won some kind of victory over Jessica, but because I'd shown Emma that love doesn't mean accepting mistreatment, and that standing up for yourself is sometimes the most loving thing you can do for everyone involved. People sometimes ask me if I regret being so harsh. I wish I'd handled things differently, but I don't regret protecting my dignity, my asset, and my granddaughter's future from people who saw them as opportunities rather than responsibilities. Jessica was right about one thing. David did deserve better than the mother I was being, the one who accepted disrespect in the name of keeping peace. He deserved a mother strong enough to teach him the difference between love and manipulation, between family loyalty and family exploitation. And I deserved better than a son who would sacrifice his mother's dignity for his wife's approval. In the end, we both got what we needed, even if it wasn't what we thought we wanted. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is refusing to enable their worst impulses. Sometimes love means letting people face the consequences of their choices, even when those consequences are painful. The house is quiet now as I finish this story. Emma is at a sleepover with friends, and David is at home, probably watching a movie or reading a book. Simple pleasures he's learned to enjoy without feeling guilty about not spending every moment. Managing someone else's emotions. Tomorrow is Saturday, which means Emma will be here for our weekly baking session. We're making snickerdoodles this time, her current favorite. She'll tell me about school, about her friends, about her dreams for the future. And I'll listen, really listen, because she's talking to someone who loves her without agenda, without condition, without calculation. That's what real love looks like. Not the desperate grasping of people who see relationships as transactions, but the steady presence of someone who wants nothing from you except the privilege of caring about you. I learned that lesson late in life, but not too late. And now I'm passing it on to Emma, hoping she'll learn it early enough to save herself from the kind of pain that comes from confusing love with obligation, kindness with weakness, family with ownership. Some stories end with dramatic reconciliations and tearful apologies. This one ends with something better. The quiet satisfaction of knowing that I taught my granddaughter the difference between being loved and being used, and that I gave my son the chance to become the kind of person who deserves the love he received. That's enough. That's everything. If this story touched you, please share it with someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't measured by their usefulness to others. And remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to accept less love than you give. Your dignity is not negotiable. Your worth is not conditional, and your love should never be taken for granted. Thank you for listening to my story. Hope it helps you write a better ending to your own.